You know, April is Financial Literacy Month, so that's why in connection with the student group here, we've been providing these workshops all about financial literacy. And we know it's one of the big concerns that we've always had across the country. You know, people concerned about how they can save money, pay off debts, protect their family, save for future things such as college planning. And then now this class all about retirement. So this is the last class of our entire series. And so those of you who have been attending ever since the first workshop one, you know, thank you for coming. And hopefully out of all of these classes, you've been able to get something very, very valuable out of it. And so this class all about retirement and wealth preservation. So this actually is a little bit of a lengthy class, so I'm going to go through it a little bit faster than usual. But you know, because retirement is one of those very, very, very important topics that a lot of us don't often quite think of very much. So kind of think of it this way. This is how I like to talk about retirement a little bit. Like, when's the last time a lot of us went on a vacation? Anyone go on a vacation in the past year or so? Okay, where did you go, sir?
This time I went to India. Before that, I went to Sydney, Australia.
India and Sydney, Australia. Wow, okay. How long was your trip there? To India?
7 days.
7 days, okay. And then how long did you prepare to, was your preparation time to plan for it? Like pretty quick, few months, 6 months, okay. Good. Anyone else take a vacation recently? No one else vacations? We all stay home and watch Wheel of Fortune right now. But anyways, but yeah, so the reason why I asked that is because, you know, like, for example, my family and I, we went to, you know, I have 2 young daughters. We love going to Disneyland. But just planning to go to a simple vacation as going to Southern California, there's so many things you already have to know and plan out, right? You have to know, like, which day are we leaving? You have to know how much money you need to have saved up to go. Like, you know, Disneyland tickets for a family is like $1,000 plus hotel. And then you have to think about where you're going to eat. And then also, how are you even going to get there? So there's so many things that go around the whole planning process, and that's usually just for like a weekend or even just like a week. But you know, the longest vacation that we're all gonna take, anyone know what that longest vacation we're all gonna take is? Retirement, exactly, right? The longest vacation we're ever gonna take is retirement. And when was the last time we ever put any sort of thought into it? Like, when is the day and time I'd like to retire? How much money do I have saved up? What's my lifestyle going to look like? What are we going to do? And so that's what this class is going to help us understand. And not only that, what are some of the blind spots that are in place when it comes to retirement planning? So let's go ahead and get started very quickly. I'll just forward through some of these slides. And so what are we going to learn in this workshop? In this workshop, we're going to see what are the sources of income we will have for retirement. We know that the moment we stop working, right now our source of income comes from where? From our employment. But we know that when we stop employment, where is our income going to come from? So understanding the key differences between some investment or some retirement plans such as annuities, how IRAs and retirement plans work. We're also going to talk about what is your plan for long-term care. So long-term care, what exactly is long-term care? Also, does Medicare cover all of your costs? These are some terms we hear about only on TV, right? Estate planning. As you know, estate planning, which is going to conclude this workshop, is all about you know, how to prepare for the future when it comes to your family. So what is the good news? Well, the good news when it comes to lifestyle is that most people are going to be living longer than usual. American life expectancy at age 65 will be age 86.6 for men and 88.8 for women. So that's a great thing. People are living longer. But then what does that include when it comes to the bad news? The bad news is that we're living longer, but we're not saving as much as we should be, or not saving enough for retirement. And we know that retirement has less to do with age and it has more to do with what? Money saved. How many people in this room, if you had $2 million today, you would stop working? You would call your boss and say, okay, I'm not going to work anymore. What's that? It's not enough. Okay, hey, you're thinking, right? Even 2 million is not enough. But you know, like a lot of times, or let's say you won the lotto, you won some like huge sum of money, then a lot of us, I know, usually when I teach this class, there's quite a few people that raise their hands. They said, yep, for sure, I will call my boss and send in my resignation letter today. And so what does that tell us? That tells us that, yeah, retirement doesn't have to do with money saved. It has to do with, with age, it totally has to do with money saved. If you have plenty of money, you don't have to wait until you're age 65. And so if we look at the type of money we're going to have in retirement, here are some ideas of places that people get money, from Social Security to pensions and IRAs, other assets you might have, such as rental properties, and then potential earnings. So we have to take a look and understand what are the sources that we are going to have. So what will Social Security look like when you retire? There's this notice that's going around that's saying around the year 2037 or so, Social Security is going to get to this point where it's going to be underfunded. So people that are, in the millennial generation, even Generation Xers, these are people where their Social Security benefits will be in question. So what will it look like by the time you get to retirement? Next, how much can you rely on for your pensions, IRAs, 401ks, or annuities? Do you have other savings? And also, will you have to borrow from your home equity, or will you have to work much longer until old age? So, using this as a brainstorming, so what are your sources of income for retirement? So that's one of the things that we always want to be able to look at. And so we look at the retirement crisis that we have going on right now. It's a very, very huge crisis. And we see that the great 401k experiment has failed many Americans. This is according to a study from NBC News. We see that you need to know this number, 18,433. What is that number? That's the median amount in a 401k savings account according to a recent report by the Employee Benefit Research Institute. Almost 40% of employees have less than 10,000, even as the proportions of companies offering alternatives like defined benefit pensions continues to drop. Wow, $18,433. What does this mean? If you look at that number, how long do you think that would last you in retirement? $18,000. 9
months.
9 months. 2 months even. Then what do? You have a huge retirement party at work. You retire for 2-3 months, and then what? Go back to work. But see, look at that verse says right there. Almost 40% of employees have less than 10,000. My goodness. And so that should be very alarming for a lot of us. Oh, that's just in general yeah, all the ages put together. So it's a little bit crazy. So you need to know you need about $1 million to retire. And so where does this number come from? Well, if we took workshop 2, we might remember something called the 10-20 rule. And the 10-20 rule says that it's recommended that you have 20 times your current income for retirement. So if your current income is about $60,000 a year, how much would you need for retirement according to the 10-20 rule? You need about $1.2 million according to the 10-20 rule. And so we have to start thinking about self-security instead of Social Security. If we can't rely on sources like Social Security or anything like that, then we need to make sure that if 1.2 million is our target amount, how do we start acting now in order to save up that amount? Okay, so now we look at, okay, if I need $1.2 million, where are the specific places I can start saving? And you look at this, there's a jungle of different sorts of terminologies and places you can save. Things like 401ks, IRAs, pensions, home equity, you name it. And so the first and foremost, what we need to ask ourselves is, what do we have? And among what we have, what do we know about it? So let's look first about IRAs. So IRAs are pretty common. And so what are IRAs? So there's 2 types of IRAs when it comes to on the personal level, the individual, and what IRA stands for, individual retirement arrangement or account, depending on who you ask, but individual retirement account. This is something that you can set up on your own. So you look at a traditional IRA, and here's like a little chart that can compare and contrast the way the two operate. So a traditional IRA, is there a tax deduction on the contribution? Well, the answer is yes. The income limits apply if you have access to work plans. So the short answer is yes. However, there are some caveats. Yes. You get a tax deduction when you contribute. So let's say that you put in $5,000 and then your income is like $50,000, then you can reduce it by $5,000. So you have less taxable income. And so that's what it means when you get a tax deduction on the contribution. But again, there's some caveats with that. For Roth IRAs, there is no tax deduction. So when you contribute to it, you pay the tax up front, and then whatever is left over, that's what you put in. Next, is there what's called a required minimum distribution? So it's a required minimum distribution. This means that whether you like it or not, whether you need the money or not, the government's requiring you to take money out, and that's at age 70 and a half. Okay, so any ideas on why you would need to withdraw money from a traditional IRA? Well, actually, because remember, has this money been taxed yet? No.
So they want it to be taxed.
Yeah, so they want you to start withdrawing so that you can.
I thought when you put money in it, the taxes you upfront.
For traditional IRA, no. Yeah. For Roth IRA, they tax you upfront. Traditional IRA, they tax you on what's called the back end. So that's why they're going to require you to start taking some money out. For Roth IRA, there is no required minimum distribution. The earnings for traditional, they will be taxed at withdrawal. Okay, so in the future, assuming that you wait until, let's say, 59 and a half, so you'll pay taxes, and that'll be at the time you withdraw. For Roth IRAs, you'll never tax unless you withdraw early. Early means before 59 and a half. Okay, so that's how you can compare and contrast. So if you look at these two as an example, if taxes go, let's say taxes go down in the future, which place would you rather have your money saved if taxes go down in the future? Yeah, taxes go down in the future. We definitely want it where? Actually, traditional. If taxes go down in the future. Why? Because you don't pay today's rate. Taxes are taken out in the future, and if the future rate is lower, then you would actually save on that side, right? But if taxes go up in the future, then Roth would be a better option because you pay today's rate, taxes go up, you withdraw in the future, you don't pay the taxes. So that's how these two work together. Okay, so it's tax deferred versus tax advantage. So at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide how can you diversify your tax liability as you enter retirement. Okay, so now we look at it. There's two different types of retirement plans. There's what's called defined benefit plan and a defined contribution plan. And so among these two plans, the defined benefit plan is what's called a traditional pension. Anyone in this room have a pension? Pension, okay. Yeah, typically if you work for like some sort of government agency, state and local, they'll give you some sort of pension plan. And then typically the other ones are what's called defined contribution plan. So what is a defined benefit plan? First, it's paid by your employer. So paid by your employer. And since it's paid by your employer, of course, the costs are on whose end? On the employer's end. So it ends up being costly for the employer. And then, but the good thing is that you will receive a set payout or a defined benefit when you get to your retirement age. So let's say, for example, you work for a company for 20 years. By the time you're 65, they're going to, during that entire time you're working there, they're setting money aside, they're contributing on your behalf. And then by the time you get to 65, you're ready to retire, they're going to tell you exactly how much you're going to receive on a monthly basis and essentially for the rest of your life. And remember, you didn't have to necessarily put money into this program. The employer was doing it for you. Does this sound pretty good?
From your paycheck?
Yeah, sometimes from your paycheck, but a lot of times on their own end, they put it in themselves. Like, yeah. So depending on how it's set up. Yeah, so, but either whether you put something in or not, they'll put it in they'll put for you, right? Yeah, it depends on how much you're making. There's a few factors that play into it. But bottom line is this. They give you a program, they put the money aside for you, and when you're done, when you retire, they're going to tell you exactly what you're going to get. So how does that compare to a defined contribution plan, which is what most people have these days, 401ks, 403bs? And so who pays for it? Who's responsible for putting the money in this sort of plan? We are, right? So we're responsible. Some employers match, not all of them do. And then the amount that you're going to receive when you retire is going to be defined on your investment. So it's not going to be defined on, so basically you put the money in on your own. It's up to you to decide how you're going to invest the money, and then whatever it's going to be worth in the future is dependent on how you chose to invest the money. So there's the only certain thing in a defined contribution plan is the amount that you're putting in. Everything after that is completely uncertain. So at the end of the day, what would you rather have? Someone put the money in for you and they tell you what you're going to get, or you put the money in yourself and you don't know what you're going to get at the end? What would you rather choose, option A or option B? So it could depend on your risk level, right? But if you ask me, I think I'd rather have someone else put the money in for me, right? Because
Save on your own also.
what's up?
Then you save on your own also.
You save what?
Then you save money, like retirement money for yourself.
Oh yeah, like for example, I know a lot of teachers, they have pension plans, and yeah, they put the whatever organization or school they're working for sets the money aside for them, and then they have a certain pension when they retire. It's very nice. Okay, so now let's look at qualified plans. So like a 401k. So it's a retirement savings plan sponsored by an employer. So that's what 401k means. So a retirement plan sponsored by an employer, and it comes from the IRC code 401 paragraph K. So that's what that means. 403b, similar to a 401k, but is available only for employees of tax-exempt organizations like schools, hospitals, or religious organizations. And then 457, it's a qualified plan available to state and local public employees and to certain nonprofit organizations. Okay, so pretty much a 401k is for private companies offering to their employees. 403b, nonprofits and tax exempt. And then 457, typically for local, state and local employees. So, in many ways they operate pretty much the same way, but just depending on the type of company you work for, that's what they're going to encode it as. Okay, so what are some advantages of 401ks, 403s, and 457s? Tax advantages. So tax-deferred earnings on deposits made with pre-tax dollars. So when you put the money in, you don't pay any taxes on it. And then as the money accumulates, you still don't pay any tax on it as well. So that's what that means. Tax-deferred earnings on deposits made with pre-tax dollars. Next, auto deduction. Okay, so this is one of the great ways for people to save. It's just automatically coming out of your paycheck each and every month. And so it's almost like a set it and forget it type of mode. And so deposits deducted from paycheck, a common form of dollar cost averaging. If you took Workshop 3, you'll probably remember dollar cost averaging. Third, matching contributions. So your company may match you, but if they do, it's great because it's a form of getting free money. So let's say they match you, let's say you make $100,000 per year and they match you 5%. So you put in 5% of your salary, which would be $5,000, and then they'll match you 5% of your salary, which would be another $5,000. So your total amount you would have would be $10,000. So you put in $5,000, the company puts in $5,000, now you have a total of $10,000 invested. Pretty cool. So that's what that means. Matching contributions. Next, portability. You can move money when leaving the job. So if you want to do a rollover into a new workplace or rollover into your own IRA, that's something you can do without having to pay any sort of taxes or penalties. And if you have a small business, so I don't think anyone in here has a small business, right? Okay, but if you do have a small business, these are some of the options. Oh, you do, okay. So these are some of the ones available: simple IRAs, SEP IRAs, KEO plans. So but yeah, if you're interested, we could talk about it more. But these are some different ways that you can fund for if you have a small business. Okay, and so here's just a chart to compare what are the current contribution limits. And this is as of 2017, okay? So as of 2017, you'll notice that IRAs, you can put in $5,500. And then notice in the brackets, there's something called catch-up. What the catch-up means is that if you're over 50, the government will allow you to put a little bit more money in so that you can, quote unquote, catch up, right? Catch up for the years that you missed out on. So if it's an IRA, the catch-up provision is about $1,000. And then for the 401ks, you'll notice the current limit, $18,000. The catch-up is $6,000. If you're the total amount that you can put in between you and the employer, $54,000. If it's a simple IRA or SEP, which are employers, self-employee or small business type plans, those are the contribution limits right there. And each year, or every few years, the contribution limit will increase. Okay, anyone have an idea of why it'll increase each year or over a period of time? Because of inflation, right? So if you took Workshop 3, you remember learning about inflation. Again, here's another great chart that shows like what are the programs that can roll into what. So if you need to, or you would like to do a rollover, these are some ways that you can see. For example, can you roll over a traditional IRA into a Roth IRA? Well, the answer is yes, but then you'll notice that there's some footnotes there. Okay, so if you need to do a rollover, you're interested in that, then there's a little chart that explains. Okay, so what are some benefits of doing rollovers? Let's say you worked at one job and then now you left that job, now you're at another job, and you have a 401k plan or some sort of retirement plan at that job. You have a few options. One, you can leave it there. Two, you can put it into your new job. Or three, you can put it into your own IRA. What are some benefits of putting it into an IRA? First, you can continue the tax deferral. So you won't need to pay the taxes by doing a rollover. You can increase your investment options. So typically some 401k accounts, they may have higher fees or maybe some limited investment options. So if you roll it over into something else, you can increase your investment options and again, potentially lower fees. And then also simplification. Again, if you worked for multiple companies and you have 401k here, 401k there, 401k there, you can consolidate and put them all into one as an easier way to simplify what you have. And I've seen, in my personal experience, I have seen quite a few people, they're like, I know I had something when I was working for company B, and I don't know what it's doing anymore, but I just know I have something there. And so by doing a rollover, it's a good way to kind of put it all back into perspective. And it's a good way to control your money. Okay, so now let's look at, let's talk a little bit about annuities, because this is a hot topic, especially for, in the industry, regulations and everything. But let's just kind of get an idea of how they work and how they could be a good tool for, potentially be a good tool for retirement. So let's just skip to the second one where it says, in an annuity, if you live a long life, you will win with the long-term payout from the insurance company. So what does this mean? So pretty much what an annuity is, and in my opinion, the best option for an annuity is to get a lifetime payout, right? But of course, it's a case-by-case basis. But what that means is you hand over a sum of money to an insurance company, and by handing it over to them, they're going to guarantee you a lifetime payout, if that's the option you choose. So as long as you live, they're going to pay that out. And it says right there, lifetime income payout option from an annuity is a good solution for people who live a long life or who worry that they may run out of money. Okay, remember the statistics before. We saw that there's a lot of people that aren't saving enough in their retirement. So whether they're saving a lot or a little, how can we help manage it so that people won't have the fear of running out of money? And so there's three types of annuities: fixed, indexed, and variable. And so among these three, it really just depends on what is the underlying investment or how is the money within the program going to grow, okay? So again, you turn over a sum of money to an insurance company. If it's a fixed annuity, how are they going to credit you interest? They're going to credit you a fixed amount each year. Typically, fixed amounts are, when you think of fixed, do you think of high returns or low returns? What's that? It depends on when. Typically, your average, high in the 80s, pretty good. 80s, 90s, you could get 8, 9, 10% even. Nowadays, fixed returns are relatively low. So it's going to give you a guaranteed or fixed rate of return growth on the money you contributed. If you get an indexed annuity, it's let me talk about variable first. So variable is very easy to understand. You put it into, you put it to the insurance company, and then they invest it in some sort of underlying investments within the market. So you'll notice that it depends on the performance of the investment choices or portfolio. So index annuity is almost like a combination of the two in a way. It has an aspect of it where, you'll get at least a minimum return, but then you could also potentially get a higher return because it's credited to a market index such as the S&P 500. So this one will give you a fixed return every year. This one will give you a range of returns anywhere from 0% up to maybe 5%. This one, it can give you unlimited growth, unlimited loss. So that's how those three work together. So it depends on what you're looking for. Okay. So there's two phases of an annuity. You put the money in. The first phase is what's called the accumulation phase. And while it's accumulating, it's good. The money is going to go tax deferred. Let's say you want to leave the money in there for about 10 years. Now 10 years is up, you're ready to do what's called the distribution phase. So during the distribution phase, these are the 5 different options you can choose from on how you're going to take the money out. Anything from lump summing the money out all the way to having the money pay out for the rest of your life, or even you and your spouse. Okay, so whether you pass away first or your spouse passes away first, it'll pay out for until the second one of you passes away. So those are what's called the distribution phase. And so remember, it's taxed as ordinary income when you withdraw. So when you withdraw, the gains portion will be taxed at ordinary income in comparison to, let's say, stocks or even mutual funds. Those are more of a, capital gains tax. 59.5 rule applies. And then typically one of the things to be aware of when it comes to annuities is that normal surrender charges between 5 to 7 years. Be aware of longer periods that may affect the withdrawals, especially near retirement age. This is why there was a huge problem with annuities in the past, is because people were entering it without understanding these what are called surrender charges. So let's say you're 60 years old, you want to retire in 3 years, but you get a 10-year surrender charge annuity. That means that for the next 10 years, if that's your program, you can't take out as much money as you want. You're going to be limited. Or if you take out anything above what you're limited to, now you're paying some large penalties and hefty fines. So that's something to be very aware of. Okay, so again, so 10% penalty if withdrawn before 59.5. So 59.5 rule applies to annuities. IRS assumes that the earnings are withdrawn first, and withdrawn money pays tax on ordinary income. So let's look at this basic example here, just so we can put some numbers behind it. So let's say you have an annuity that grows $10,000 after you purchase it, and then you decide to withdraw $5,000. So if your tax bracket is 25%, you pay 10% penalty. Okay, so assuming you're younger than 59.5, so you'll pay a 10% penalty, which would be $500. And then secondly, you would pay the tax on it, which would be another 25%, which would be another $1,250. So the total tax and penalty would be $1,750. All right? So how do we avoid, or how do we reduce the amount of money we're going to pay for taxes or penalties? Wait until at least 59.5. That make sense? So after 59.5, you'll still need to pay the tax at 25%, but you won't have to do the 10% penalty. Yes?
What's the benefit of using annuity instead of just investment portfolio?
Investment portfolio? It would be for, really, like in my opinion, the best use for it would be if someone has that concern of running out of money in the future, and so they just want to make sure that whether, they wake up every day knowing that each month I'm guaranteed to get a certain payout. So that would be the whole.
So it's not dependent on the economy?
Correct, yeah. So so the neat thing is that even if, like most annuities, for example, let's say you put in $100,000, right? Typically, they'll let you withdraw 5% of that value per year for the rest of your life. 5,000 would be, 5% of 100,000 would be 5,000, right? So guaranteed you'll get $5,000 per year for the rest of your life, right? Mathematically, how long will it take before that money runs out? About 20 years, right? But if you live longer than 20 years and the money has hypothetically, been all depleted, they will still pay you that $5,000 until you pass away. Okay, so that's kind of like the thing that, that would be the purpose of getting an annuity, right? But at the same time, so a lot of people like that idea because it gives them security, especially when you're retired, you have no more source of income. At least this is going to come in every month. But again, we have to understand what are the things we need to be aware of when getting them. Okay, so you could also roll over, just continue on this annuity thing, you could also roll over an annuity, your 401k into an annuity. So like using your retirement plan money for this sort of thing. It gives you some flexibility, also some income protection. So for example, if you put it in a fixed or an index annuity, you can still potentially get some gains out of it without being exposed to market risk. And so again, and then of course the peace of mind if you live a long life when you turn on the income stream. Okay, and then immediate annuity. This one I already spoke to already. Okay, all right, so let's go on to the next section. So that was all about annuities when it comes to retirement. So that could be a good portion if you're thinking about lifetime income. Now let's look at the next part, which is long-term care. Healthcare is one of the big concerns when we get to retirement because, of course, as we get older, just like anything out there, whether it's computers or even piano, even our bodies, right? As we get older, it starts to break down a little bit. So what is long-term care? And, based on the statistics, there's a good chance you will need long-term care. Did you know that 7 out of 10 people over 65 will need some form of long-term care? And that 4 out of 10 people receiving long-term care are between the ages of 18 and 64. So what is long-term care? Long-term care is the help you need when you're not able to do some of the basic activities of daily living. And these are the 6 activities of basic living: bathing, dressing, eating, continence, toileting, and moving in and out of bed. So any 2 of those you cannot perform on your own, you would be considered as needing long-term care. Long-term care is often associated with older people, but accidents and illnesses can happen at any age. So think about people who have had a stroke, chronic illness, or Alzheimer's. So my friend Joe in the back over there, he used to work for a skilled nursing facility, also outpatient clinic, and he would see people recovering, needing physical therapy for having a stroke or anything like that. And some of these people were not even in their 60s yet. So those are situations where long-term care can help manage those costs. Okay, and so if we look at just the basic cost of long-term care, take a look at this, the effects of long-term care on retirement savings and assets. So remember that $1.2 million we're talking about, that's basically just living off of, right? Just to make sure you have income to take care of your daily needs. But if we throw long-term care in there, take a look at how the costs really skyrocket. If you need a home health aide, imagine paying $21 an hour at approximately $31,000 a year. Homemaker services, assisted living facility, nursing home, and also a private room at a nursing home. Look, you could pay as much as $85,000 long-term care. Kind of think of it this way. Anyone have older parents right now? Older parents, maybe in their like 60s, 70s, 80s. You know, my mother-in-law is about to turn 70. My father-in-law is 70. Like my parents are still in their 50s. But still, like, think of it. If something were to happen to, let's say, my mom and dad, would I be able to drop everything I'm doing now and take care of them 24/7 if they need long-term care? Definitely not, right? Because why? I have 2 kids. I have a lot of expenses to take care of. So it'd be impossible for me to stop doing what I'm doing to help take care of them 24/7, to help them with these daily living. So now, if I'm not able to do it, let's fast forward, you know, I'm 34 years old. Let's fast forward 40 years from now, or even 50 years from now. Let's say I'm in my 50s and I need long-term care. If I was not able to stop what I'm doing, can I expect my 2 daughters to stop what they're doing to take care of me? Absolutely not. So this is why it's important to think about, you know, long-term care and how much it's going to cost. And again, this is, remember when we're talking about the 20 times your salary, that's just for basic living expense. Now imagine if you need to throw long-term care in there. It can be astronomical. Okay, so now let's keep going on. So what are some misconceptions with long-term care? So you can get long-term care with life insurance, as we spoke about in workshop 2. But you know, like the average annual cost of long-term care in the U.S. is $83,580. So who will pay for it, and who will take care of you? You know, it says over here, will your spouse take care of you? And I've seen this situation happen with my own eyes. Something where the husband needed long-term care, or the wife, and now the spouse is the one taking care. But then something happens to the other spouse, whether they pass away or they go on long-term care themselves. So now there's this situation where no one's there to take care of each other. So we have to always have that in mind. And you know, the risk of developing Alzheimer's, again, another situation that could lead to long-term care. Over 65, 1 in 9 people and 1 out of 3 people have the risk of developing Alzheimer's. So if you have few assets and live on Social Security benefits, should you buy long-term care? You know, there's a big reason, or you know, a big argument on why you should, just because you don't have a lot of assets. And so it could help maximize whatever you have. You don't have to dip into your, you know, whatever little savings you have. Okay, let's talk about Medicare, Medicaid, and long-term care, the 3 of these together, because there's a lot of confusion when it comes to how these 3 intertwine. So if you need Medicare, so this is when you're over 65. I know it doesn't apply to very many people in this room at all, but just so you can get the idea of what it's like when you get to retirement. So Medicare normally covers short-term care up to 100 days. Medicaid, or Medi-Cal in California, it covers long-term care, but it has very strict income and asset requirements, qualification rules. Basically, in order to qualify for Medicare, just think of it, you basically have to have no money, right, essentially, to qualify for Medi-Cal, or Medicaid in this case, but Medi-Cal in California. And so what is long-term care? Long-term care is the coverage you purchase to provide medical and non-medical care services when you're unable to perform the basic activities of daily living. And long-term care means that over 90 days, typically over 90 days or more. So the first 90 days, your typical health insurance will cover it. After 90 days, then it becomes long-term care. Okay, and so Medicare, it's the health insurance you'll need after age 65, unless you're still covered by your employer's plan. And these are the 4 parts. I'm just going to go through it very quickly. But the idea here is just so that you start getting an idea of exactly what Medicare is and how it works. You apply it through your Social Security. Every single paycheck you receive, you notice that you pay some payroll taxes, which includes Medicare. So that's basically what you're setting money aside is for this future health care that you're going to get. Okay, and think of it, age 65 is the magic number for Medicare. Okay, and then also, Medicare itself, as we know, does not cover everything. So if you want to, what's called supplement plans or get supplement or GAP program, this will cover the additional portions that Medicare will not cover. Medicare covers about 80% of your expenses. The remaining 20%, where does it come from? Comes from me, right? Comes right out of my pocket. So that's where the GAP program can come into play. All right, and so you'll take a look over here. These are the different GAP programs available from Plan A all the way to Plan N. Plan F is the one that has the most additional coverage. Naturally, it's going to cost a little bit more for you to get that premium. Okay, and then the last one is called Medicare Advantage. So traditional Medicare is Part A, Part B, and Part D. Or you can get Part C, which is a combination of A, B, and D, right? And so those are how those ones work together. And then you can get a MEDIGAP program that'll cover additional out-of-pocket costs. Real quick question. Even if you get a MEDIGAP program, will that cover long-term care? No, it will not, okay? So again, Medicare, again, is just think of Medicare for about the first 100 days. That's what it's for. After that, it falls under the category of long-term care. So it'll be a completely different situation. And again, I've worked with a lot of retirees that thought that Medicare was going to cover long-term care, and it will not, okay? All right, we're almost done here. Okay, so retiree healthcare may cost more than you think. Look at this number. This is according to a survey done in 2015 from CNBC. Look at this, the average lifetime retirement healthcare premium cost for a hypothetical couple is $266,589. So this would be if a person gets Part A, Part B, and Part D, as well as supplemental insurance, so a MEDIGAP plan. And this is according to HealthView's latest report, assuming a life expectancy of 87 for men and 89 for women. So where do these costs come from? Here's the breakdown. And you'll notice that, see where it says monthly cost, annual cost, from age to age, the premium actually increases when you're on Medicare and Medicare, MEDIGAP or Medicare Advantage. So you'll notice it goes up every year, right? So this is like, let's say you have no programs, you get Medicare, you get Part A, Part B.
But you were buying it.
Yes, you're buying it yourself, yes, okay? And this is how much it would cost you. And then of course, because of inflation, this is if you were 70 years old today, right? Or this is if you're 80 years old today, this is how much you'd pay. But if you calculate in inflation, let's say you're 65 today, you calculate inflation into this whole picture, that number doubles all the way to $402,000. So yes, healthcare can cost quite a bit of money. If you include dental and vision, now that $266,000 goes to almost $400,000. So retiree healthcare costs may be more than we think. So, what are some ways to cut costs? Maybe rethink our house. And so do we still need the same amount of space? This is why you hear a lot of retirees move to retirement communities or different locations, because maybe it might be easier to upkeep, lower maintenance costs, look for an area with lower property and income taxes. That could be huge in the future. Look for a place closer to your doctor. Equity from downsizing can put savings into your retirement. Maybe better weather. What's one of the popular retirement states? Florida, right? I was in Florida a few months ago. It's actually not bad there. I don't know about living there, but nice weather. Okay, last topic, estate planning. So estate planning is a process of determining the distribution of your assets upon your death. And estate planning also covers the management of your professional affairs in the event of incapacity. Okay, so wealth preservation. Everybody has an estate. That's the first thing we need to know, because your estate is everything you own minus your debt. So if you own a car, home, or other real estate, bank accounts, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, annuities, retirement plans, if you own businesses, furniture, personal possessions, these are all part of your estate. Thus, everyone needs to have an estate plan, not just the wealthy. Okay, let's take a look at some of these questions right here, and we'll fill in the blank. So, and remember, this isn't going to be very exhaustive, but just give you an idea of what estate planning is. So, to ensure that my property will go to whom I choose when I die, I can make a simple will. Okay, so that's what a will is, to decide who's going to get your property. Next, to avoid the probate process, I can consider a trust. Okay, so what is a trust? I would not want my family to have to try to make decisions for me, so I can fill out advance directives. Okay, so that's in the healthcare realm. I can give authority to a trusted person to manage my accounts and my finances if I'm able to by signing a power of attorney. I think the first time I ever heard power of attorney was on one of those soap operas on TV. They talk about those things, right? Anyway, so to protect my children, I will name a legal guardian. What else? To make sure all my investment accounts would go to the persons I specify, I can register and frequently update my beneficiaries. Make sure to update beneficiaries, especially if you are recently had a divorce, a remarriage. One of your kids makes you very angry and you don't want them to receive any inheritance. You name it, right? To protect my children, their education, and cover my debt, I will evaluate the correct amount of life insurance. Again, that's a review of workshop 2 that we spoke about. If my total estate is over $1 million, I may be subject to estate tax. And I can direct a portion of my life insurance proceeds to pay for final expenses. We know nowadays, final expenses and funerals can cost quite a bit of money. So to ensure my final expenses are handled according to my wishes, I will keep this instruction in a safe place along with my other important documents. Okay. If you own a business, you need to make sure you have a succession plan in place. And if you have a partner in the business, you need to have a buyout agreement. So who's going to take over this business when something happens to you? All of your important documents, trust, wills, agreements, insurance, debt, retirement, investment accounts, and any CDs or annuities need to be kept together in a safe place. What good is it that you have everything done the right way, but nobody knows the existence of any of these documents? Hey, let's say you have like $1 million of life insurance, but your family doesn't know, right? It's pretty funny. I do work with a lot of, husband and wife. The wife goes, I don't want my husband to know about that I have this one. But then, hey, if something happens to you, no one can file the claim. Same thing with the will, right? Or let's say that you even do know that there's a will or trust, these documents exist. It's at a safety deposit box at the bank, but then you don't give access to anybody else. So pass away, no one can access these anymore. So that's why it's very important to think all those things through. Here's a tip. You can have important documents stored in digital form for easier access, especially when traveling. So so why do we talk about this whole estate preservation portion? Because did you know that if you leave your assets to your child, and if the child is a minor, the court will appoint a guardian that will take care of the assets as well as the child. So who decides there? The government or the courts. And the child will get the inheritance when he or she reaches legal age. So if the child is not legal age yet, then they're not going to really have full access to that money. Is that something you want? Well, maybe it's something you want, right? but a lot of times it might not be. Maybe you want the child to have a certain portion of it every year to pay for basic expenses. So we need to have that written down. And so if you don't have a plan, who has a plan for you? The government. And do we always like their plan? Not always, right? Do they work for free also? Do they work fast? No, that's why you'll see people like Prince. I know we say that estate planning is not just for the wealthy, but people like Prince or Whitney Houston who did not have proper estate planning, they lost huge portions of their assets to probate fees and the long, lengthy process of battling who gets what. So it's just another way for you to, if you have all of these in place, then you'll know exactly who's getting it, and then that it'll be able to avoid all of those sticky situations. So if you have children, some do you know questions. If you have children and are remarried and you pass away, the assets go to your current spouse. Did you know that? And the serving step-parent or the current spouse has no obligation to support the deceased spouse's biological children. like the movie, like the Cinderella, right? We all seen Cinderella. So you have a responsibility to plan ahead. The best time to start an estate plan is when? Now. Life isn't predictable. You never know what's going to happen. And so also when you travel, you should have all of these also taken care of. You know, last will and testament, healthcare directives, power of attorney, child travel consent, just in case. Okay, so if you have a plan in place, one with instructions that will protect your family, it will give you some great peace of mind. This is one of the most thoughtful and considerate things you can do for yourself and for your loved ones. Of course, they have to deal with, you know, whatever situation you're passing or something like that. And then now, at least, if anything, the documents and the plans are already in place. Okay, so let's just conclude right here. Believing in your future. You can become financially independent. So one of our goals out of this entire workshop series was to do what? To help us start believing in our financial future and how to become financial independent. So having a plan of action, everything we've learned up until this point, we learned about how to increase our cash flow from workshop 1. And so how to, how you can better pay off your debts or be able to free up a lot of your money. How to spend less and save more by rebalancing your budget, getting more savings, reducing debts and liabilities, and also understanding how money works, right? From workshop 2 to workshop 3 and workshop 4 today, we helped you really understand how money works so you can start getting those basic plans in place. Creating a financial goal. After reading this, now we have an idea of how much it's going to cost, I guess, to retire. What was the rule that we learned? The 10-20 rule, remember? We need about 20 times our income in order to retire. So if that's our goal, what do we need to start doing now in order to start building that? And not only building that, we have to think about taxes. We have to think about, what age we want to retire at. And so hopefully we can start creating a great financial goal and start building a good financial future. So have a life of purpose by building a legacy through the estate planning process. And then embrace change and expect to succeed. So change your habits, expect to win, get up and get out, build the world and see the world, okay? Find something you believe in and dedicate your life to put for it. All right, so hey, that's the end of our 4th workshop, the retirement planning. I know I went through it extremely fast, but basically what this class is all about, right? Especially if you're not in a stage yet of retirement. But it's something that we should always think about. And going back to the example I used in the beginning of the class, we spend so much time and effort and money planning just simple getaways, simple vacations that last a month. And so now that retirement, it could easily last 20, 30, even 40 years for some people. And so if that's how long retirement's going to be, let's take some time now to start planning it, to start understanding what we need and how we can get there and make sure that we retire with dignity. And not only retire with dignity, but also have all of our estates in order so that we can make sure that our family is well taken care of, on this side and also the other side, okay? So with that said, thank you guys so much for attending our workshops. I know some of you came to all 4 workshops. And our hope is that in Financial Literacy Month, everyone was able to get a taste of what it means to start understanding your finances. And through our education program, you can start taking the steps needed in order to start building the financial future, right? Your financial security is not a dream, it is a priority. Make it a priority, and then your financial future will be underhand, okay? So again, thank you guys so much for coming, and you have our contact. This is the last class, but don't worry, all across the country, we have our classes on a weekly basis. You can come in for free. You'll get the workbook when you attend the class, and you can talk to any of us in the back, and we could let you know what the future workshop schedules is, okay? All right, thank you guys so much, and hope you all have a great day. Thank you.